The movie opens with a young woman named Daisy, who finds herself trapped in a nightmare she never saw coming. What started as a search for adventure quickly turns into a desperate fight for survival, where escaping alive seems almost impossible. After graduating from college, Daisy sets out for another city to start a new job. Instead of taking the main highway, she decides to make the trip more exciting by driving through remote forests and winding mountain roads. At first, everything seems perfectly normal. But before long, her GPS starts acting strangely, sending her in different directions over and over again. Eventually, Daisy ends up in the middle of nowhere, where the road suddenly comes to an end. Panicked, she tries to turn back, but the GPS keeps telling her to make another U-turn. Soon, she's completely trapped, unable to move forward or find her way back. Frustrated by the constant wrong directions, Daisy finally gives up on the GPS and pulls out an old-fashioned paper map to figure out the route herself. Just then, a large truck pulls up beside her. Since she's alone in the middle of an isolated area, Daisy immediately goes on high alert. The man inside the truck listens to her situation and kindly offers to help by showing her the route on the map. At first glance, he seems like a friendly stranger just trying to help. But then Daisy notices something unsettling. Without saying a word, the man quietly locks the truck door. That single move instantly raises a red flag. Moments later, he starts insisting that Daisy come back to his house with him. His overly friendly attitude and increasingly strange behavior send chills down her spine. The moment Daisy firmly refuses, the man's true colors are revealed. Everything spirals out of control as two men suddenly begin chasing her. Daisy runs for her life, struggling to understand how a normal day turned into a living nightmare within minutes. As she sprints through the rough terrain, she badly injures her leg. The pain becomes almost unbearable, making every step feel impossible. But the sound of the men closing in behind her leaves her with no choice but to keep running. When they get dangerously close, Daisy grabs a heavy rock and hurls it at them. The unexpected attack distracts them for a few precious seconds, giving her just enough time to disappear deep into the dense forest. As evening falls, Daisy keeps running for hours until she finally reaches a small river. She's so exhausted and dehydrated that she doesn't even stop to wonder if the water is safe. She drops to her knees and drinks straight from the river. Surrounded by the endless forest, the reality of her situation finally sinks in. She's completely alone. Fear is written all over her face, but she refuses to give up. She keeps reminding herself that no matter what happens, she has to find a way out alive. When night falls, Daisy discovers a hidden spot in the woods and decides to stay there until morning. She spends the entire night terrified, expecting an attack at any moment. Somehow, luck stays on her side and nothing happens. The next morning, her injured leg becomes her biggest concern. Afraid the wound might get infected, she cleans it using river water and the soft drink she has left with her. The pain is almost unbearable, but she forces herself to push through. Unfortunately, in her desperation, Daisy makes one mistake that will soon come back to haunt her. Blood from Daisy's wound drips onto the nearby leaves, leaving a trail behind. Meanwhile, the two men are still searching the forest for her. To cover up their crime, they return to the spot where Daisy's car is parked. They drive the car away and stage a fake accident, hoping the police will believe she died in a tragic crash. At the same time, Daisy's condition keeps getting worse. Her injured leg has swollen badly, and every few steps she has to stop and catch her breath. She can't stop regretting the decision that brought her here. If she had stayed on the main road, she would have probably made it to her interview by now. Instead, she's trapped in the middle of a deadly forest with no idea if she'll ever make it out alive. Exhausted, scared, and overwhelmed, Daisy breaks down in tears. But then, a deafening crash echoes through the mountains. She looks up and realizes someone has pushed her car off the cliff to make it look like a real accident. A moment later, she hears the voices of the two men. They're telling each other they need to find the girl's body before the police arrive. They're convinced she couldn't have escaped very far. With so much blood loss, they assume she's already dead somewhere in the forest. Then one of them notices fresh bloodstains on the leaves. That's when they realize Daisy is still alive. Without wasting another second, they spread out and begin searching every corner of the forest. While trying to hide, Daisy discovers a broken cell phone wedged between a pile of rocks. It must have fallen from her car during the crash. The screen is completely shattered, but to her surprise, the phone is still powered on. For the first time in hours, she feels a spark of hope. She immediately tries calling for help, but the dense forest has no signal at all. Desperate, Daisy keeps moving from one spot to another, searching for even a single bar of reception. She even wades through freezing ice-cold water and climbs the hill on the other side, hoping the higher ground will help. But nothing works. Then the battery dies. The phone shuts off, and with it, the last bit of hope she had left. Hunger, freezing temperatures, unbearable pain, and constant fear have pushed her body to its absolute limit. After days of stress and exhaustion, Daisy finally collapses and loses consciousness. When she wakes up, she's in a place she's never seen before. Someone has cleaned and bandaged her injured leg, as if they treated her while she was unconscious. Slowly, she gets to her feet and tries to leave. But just then, a man walks into the room. The moment Daisy sees him, she panics. After everything she's been through, she's in no condition to trust a stranger. She grabs the nearest weapon she can find and warns him not to come any closer. Fear has completely taken over her mind. No matter how calmly the man tries to explain himself, Daisy refuses to believe a single word. In a panic, she snatches up a nearby container and throws the white powder inside straight at his face. The man instantly screams in agony. That wasn't ordinary powder. It was an extremely dangerous chemical. He rushes to the refrigerator, grabs a carton of milk, and pours it over his head, knowing it's the quickest way to reduce the chemical burn. Daisy is horrified. She never meant to do something so dangerous. She acted purely out of fear. Meanwhile, after not hearing from Daisy for several days, her family has become desperate. Using the last known location of her phone, they file a missing person report with the police. Now, the local officers are preparing to launch a full investigation. When Daisy regains consciousness again, she makes a terrifying discovery. Her hands are tightly tied together. Daisy noticed that the man standing in front of her didn't seem nearly as terrifying as he had at first. He brought her food and water, telling her to eat and regain her strength. But the moment Daisy mentioned calling the police, he quickly changed the subject. After going 2 days without food, she couldn't hold back anymore. As soon as the man turned around, she devoured the meal. Little by little, she started wondering if he wasn't the monster she had imagined. During their conversation, the man introduced himself as Henry. He revealed that he'd been living completely alone in the middle of that forest for years, using an old van as his makeshift laboratory. After Daisy told him everything that had happened, Henry immediately realized who the 2 men chasing her really were. Just then, a noise echoed from outside. Henry's expression instantly turned serious. The look on his face was enough for Daisy to realize that the men she'd escaped from had probably found them. And she was right. Those same 2 men were standing outside the cabin. The truth was, only 3 people lived in that forest. They had been working together for years. Henry was the one who manufactured the product, while the other 2 handled the deliveries. But this time, they weren't there for business. They had come for one reason only, to find the injured girl. Henry did everything he could to keep them from coming inside. He made excuses, stalled for time, and tried to distract them. But eventually, the 2 men forced their way in. Strangely, the cabin looked completely empty. While they searched around, Henry quickly hid Daisy's food and water, erasing every trace that she had been there. Everything looked so normal that the 2 men never became suspicious. What they didn't know was that, before they arrived, Daisy had managed to free herself. Using the chemicals inside the room, she mixed them with water to trigger a reaction that burned through the ropes tying her up. Then she slipped out through the back window. But here's the surprising part. She didn't run. Daisy knew she had no idea how to survive in that unfamiliar forest. If she wandered off alone, she could end up in even greater danger. So instead of fleeing, she hid nearby and waited. When Henry discovered what she'd done, he was genuinely impressed. He never expected a city girl to have such a solid understanding of chemistry. Daisy admitted that she had made a mistake earlier. At first, she didn't realize how dangerous that white powder really was, and in her panic, she'd acted without thinking. She sincerely apologized to Henry. As the days passed, the two of them began talking more, and slowly, trust started to grow between them. Finally, Daisy asked the question that had been bothering her all along. If you're really trying to help me, why won't you let me leave? Henry finally told her the truth. He didn't have a vehicle, and the nearest road, or even the closest small town, was nearly 20 miles away. In her condition, there was no way Daisy could survive a journey like that on foot. On top of that, the forest was so dense that she'd almost certainly get lost. Still, Henry made her a promise. He told Daisy that in just a few more days he would finish preparing his final batch. After that, he would personally take her out of the forest and make sure she got to safety. For the first time since everything began, Daisy finally felt a sense of relief. The days went by, and the bond between them grew stronger. She had almost completely started trusting Henry. But there was one thing she still didn't know. She had no idea what game was really being played. Then, one day, a police officer suddenly arrived at the cabin. And that's when the shocking truth finally began to unfold. Henry and those two men were actually working for the same female police officer. She was the real mastermind behind the entire operation. Under her protection, the two men had been hunting young women in the forest for years. No one even knew how many innocent girls had disappeared because of them. When Daisy first wandered into the forest, Matt and his partner were busy hiding a dead body. They immediately assumed Daisy had witnessed everything. That's why they started hunting her down. They couldn't risk leaving a single witness alive. The female officer had come back for the exact same reason. But Henry refused to let her get anywhere near the house. He was doing everything he could to protect Daisy. With no other choice, the officer was forced to leave. A little while later, Matt arrived to pick up the supplies. Before leaving, he smugly showed off the jacket the police officer had given him. But then his eyes landed on the footprints near the staircase. There were clearly two different sets of shoe prints. Matt instantly realized someone else was hiding inside the house. He didn't let it show, though. Instead, he acted like he hadn't noticed a thing. Meanwhile, Henry had no idea that Matt had already figured everything out. That night, Henry and Daisy were secretly planning their escape through the forest. But before they could make a move, Matt suddenly walked into the room, turning the situation into a deadly standoff. Thinking fast, Henry tried to flip the situation in his favor. He told Matt that killing Daisy now would be a mistake. Over the past few days, he claimed, he had completely gained her trust, and now she could actually help with their operation. To prove it, Henry calmly ordered Daisy to make coffee for everyone. Daisy immediately understood the message hidden in his eyes. Without saying a word, she quietly poured the coffee into the cups and secretly mixed a special chemical into each one, making it look as if everything was perfectly normal. Once the cups were ready, she placed them inside the microwave to heat up. Matt pulled everything off so cleverly that neither Henry nor his partner suspected a thing. But by the time they realized something was wrong, it was already too late. Suddenly, a massive explosion ripped through the area, throwing everything into complete chaos. Somehow, both of them managed to escape the blast alive. Henry's back had been badly injured, but the truly terrifying part was that Matt had survived too. Even after being burned and seriously wounded, he still managed to crawl out alive. Henry knew there was no way he could match Matt's strength in a direct fight. But no matter what, he wasn't going to let Daisy die. Gathering every last bit of strength he had left, Henry lunged forward and ripped the gun out of Matt's hand. For a brief moment, it looked like the nightmare was finally coming to an end. Then, without warning, 2 gunshots echoed through the forest. The shots had come from a police officer. The instant Daisy heard the gunfire, she knew something terrible had happened. Her heart shattered, but staying there meant certain death. Turning her fear and grief into determination, she ran as fast as she could. Meanwhile, the officer had already figured out exactly what was going on. But there wasn't a trace of fear. The only concern was the final shipment of drugs safely hidden inside the vehicle. Now there was only one obstacle standing in the way: Daisy. And he had already decided. Daisy had to die. After hours of running through the unforgiving wilderness and risking her life at every step, Daisy finally reached the main road. But fate wasn't on her side. Standing there was the same male officer. Daisy had never seen this before, but she recognized her voice immediately. Back when she was hiding inside Henry's house, she had overheard that officer talking to him. So the moment the officer spoke, Daisy instantly realized she had fallen straight into another deadly trap. At gunpoint, the officer forced Daisy into a vehicle and drove her to a nearby river. This was the final stage plan. No matter how much Daisy begged for mercy, though remained completely cold and emotionless. Daisy realized the officer intended to kill her and make it look like accidentally drowned. As Daisy stepped into the water, it seemed like escaping from there was her last chance to survive. But the officer was already prepared. He grabbed Daisy without hesitation and violently shoved her beneath the water. Weak, exhausted, and badly injured, Daisy couldn't overpower her. She struggled desperately, fighting with everything she had left, but every attempt failed. Little by little, the air left her lungs. Her vision began to fade. Then, at the very last second, with death only moments away, Daisy remembered something. Before leaving the lab, she had secretly hidden a small weapon for emergencies. With the last bit of strength she had left, she pulled it out and launched a surprise attack on the officer. And that was where this terrifying nightmare finally came to an end. The corrupt police officer who had spent years protecting criminals, murdering innocent people, and turning that forest into a living hell finally faced the consequences of her own actions. Daisy escaped the cursed forest alive, but there was no happiness on her face. Only emptiness. Only trauma. Everything she had witnessed, everything she had endured, had changed her forever. With this, the story ends here. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section and also subscribe to this channel for more stories like this.